Hello, Kursad. Thank you so much for your grade 6 grade exam submission. Yeah, I would love to give you some feedback today about your exam. I think you have really, really nice things about your playing. There's a lot of very positive things that you've built up, a lot of really, really sound fundamentals that you've built up. And I think there's a lot here to be proud of. A lot of work went into this, obviously, and I think this is a good step for expanding even further. I think there's a lot of really nice things to celebrate here, which we'll kind of get into. At the same time, I think there are some, definitely some things that we can work on, and probably my main points would be just right out of the open here, would be to think about, especially in the repertoire, musically what we want to do and having sort of a very, very clear idea, really having a musical plan that we can execute. Because I think you really play very nicely. You have a nice tone, you have a nice, you seem to play very much with ease. I also think there's maybe some left-hand things that we could work on to facilitate more of that's sort of a constant quest with guitar, is just getting it easier to play and feeling more comfortable. I think there's both right and left hand things we can do to actually make that that ideal more of a reality. So that's a few things I'll talk about as far as some technique stuff. But I think in terms of the musical ideas, I think possibly some of the things that you're trying to do are not fully coming across to the listener. And, when we, especially classical guitar, there's so much, this style of guitar playing, there's so much more that we have to do, especially as we get into these higher grades. I mean, technically the pieces are getting harder, but I think it's nothing that's anywhere out of your physical capacity at this point. But what happens is also the pieces become more musically demanding, and that's kind of the big thing. They need more interpretation. They need more, they really need a sort of a complete, we want to craft a full interpretation of a piece right now. It's just more than just playing the right notes and playing the right rhythm. Of course, all that's important, but I think the next challenge for you would be to really kind of craft a full musical interpretation of everything that you want to do within a piece. We're talking dynamics, talking phrasing, talking color choices, talking rubato, kind of all the things that in the technical assessment that we put into that little excerpt that's in there of the I believe it's the Napoleon Cost piece. We want to take that and actually apply that across the board. Think that way. And you're playing music that really lends itself to, the repertoire choices were great, and they really lend themselves to more musical attention to detail, I think. So I think you spent, you mentioned here, I think you really spent, a good amount of time in grade 6. 2 years is definitely a good, I think it needs that much, this music. And you said here you submitted because you could play the pieces well enough, and I agree, you did play the pieces very well. And you said you were kind of disappointed though after the recording, and I think what you might be disappointed about is maybe it could be what I was saying before, that maybe some of the musical ideas didn't really come across. Like, for example, when we are in a situation where we're playing and we feel like we're in a little uncomfortable situation, recording is definitely one of them. Sometimes the first thing to go is our musical ideas. We kind of get into this mode where we play things very safe. We're kind of not trying to make a mistake. I know you mentioned here too about the challenge of playing this much music. The necessity to play all the pieces without interruption. And I think you did a really good job. You did about 15 minutes of repertoire. That's, this is standard high class repertoire here. This is these are, we're starting to get into pieces that professional guitarists are playing in concert halls throughout the world. So in that case, I think you really did hold it together very, very well. And you said you speed up during the recording as if you wanted to finish the exam as soon as possible. I maybe didn't necessarily get the sense of that. It did, not that this is going to come across negatively, I don't want it to, but it did seem like maybe at some point you were more kind of going through the motions. And I think the biggest thing was trying to, maybe the mindset was not make a mistake. And sometimes, I would rather a very musical performance with 2 or 3 mistakes. They could even be pretty big mistakes or wrong note or something. And the musicality is there and the interpretation is there. Okay. So that's one of the things I would say, maybe take more risks, take more chances with the musical ideas. I think it's okay. I think you have it in you to do that. So that would be one of my sort of challenges moving forward. So I think my only strength is that I love playing the guitar and work consistently. I spend at least an hour every day. That's good. I could tell that to play at this level, it has to be something you enjoy to a certain extent. Otherwise, you wouldn't have spent the hours and the time to get to this level. So obviously you are, you really do love what you're doing here, and you really are motivated to play this music, which I think is great. So let's dig in. Like I said, my big takeaway when we get to the repertoire would be some of the musical ideas. But let's get to the technical assessment, because this is also going to reflect, I think, some things that I feel that we might be able to work on to make your musical ideas maybe come through even easier, and the execution of those ideas to be easier. So we start here with the right hand preparation. Now, this is something that I think is going to be very, very important going forward in a lot of the repertoire that you are going to maybe encounter later on. I in terms of that too, I think there is definitely enough here to satisfy the grade 6 requirement. I would still say I would like maybe to see you put some more of the musical ideas into this music that you know already, and I would definitely maintain this repertoire, even though there might be some fatigue with it, and you might be tired of hearing these pieces. Maybe put them down for a little bit, but I think it would be worth it to pick them back up and play them again, and add some of the things that I'm going to suggest here today to these pieces to really, really, again, kind of craft this full interpretation of the piece. I think all of them maybe are not quite ready yet. I would like to see a little bit more musical seasoning on them. I think technically most of them are ready, but the idea of just putting a little bit more musicality into them. So let's just start with the in the assessment here, some things with the right hand preparation. So if you see how your thumb is really only playing when it's not prepping ahead of time. So with this right hand preparation, one of the things that we want to focus on here is the idea of, when we do set up the right hand for this exercise, we want to have it where, we're kind of practicing, and sometimes exercises are meant to be maybe not how we would want it to sound if it was a piece. We would want it maybe more legato and more resonant. But for the sake of this exercise, we want to start with everything down, and then when the I, M, and A play, so I, M, and A play, the thumb is already prepped, the thumb plays, I, M, A go down, they play, the thumb is down again. So we have this back and forth. So one of the things that we don't get here is sort of the musicality, or the, not musicality, but the resonance of the strings ringing. So yours sounds more like this, which is okay, but I'm not really doing any right hand prepping. With the right hand prep, it would be. again, sometimes we'll practice something that it's just really to get more control of the right hand. And probably if this was a piece, we might want it to sound more. But just to have the control that if we did want to play a short and staccato, we could do that as well. So the big thing there is you're not hearing the resonance of the strings ringing over each other, because we are doing that prep of I am an A, thumb plays. As soon as the thumb plays I am a reset, they play thumb, so it's just back and forth between the two. And that's going to be the same for each of these variations too. So for example, in the second one, I start with everything prepped, a full plant, full prep, and then I go A, M, I, thumb, and as soon as the thumb plays, A goes back on the string. So let me just do it in context here. Again, you can hear that very short thumb note. So all of these would be the same type of thing. So you can hear how you're playing, or even see it, that there's really not a lot of prep ahead of time. I mean, you're not like you're wasting motion or anything, but we would want that so as you like as soon as A plays, we would want the thumb prepped, so I wouldn't hear that bass note ringing for so long. Other thing there, if we're going da da ba 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 da ba ba E and a 4 E, and this is my quarter note pulse. The triplets, they're just eighth note triplets, not 16th note triplets. So the tempo wouldn't be as fast. So it would be so if we're 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a da 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 ba 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 ba, triplet, 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 triplet. You're going ba 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 ba. You're kind of playing sextuplets, 16th note triplets. Da da ba 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 ba. So let me just get your pulse for a moment, and I'll kind of show you what the triplets would be. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so if you're da 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 2 E and a 4 E and ba 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 ba. That would be the tempo there. I think there were other versions of this exercise where it was a faster subdivision. So actually the fastest subdivision that you're doing in this whole page is the 16th notes. But we start out with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then 16th notes. Back to 16th and then back to 8th notes. You do a good job with this tempo here. So see how, like you can even see your A finger, how after it plays, it just kind of stays away from the string. Again, we would want that idea of the sort of the magnetism of the strings pulling our fingers back, sort of this magnetic attraction back to the strings. So we can kind of go go through this. So I would say just overall with this exercise, we would just want, more prep. And that's something that's going to help, when we get into like the Villa Lobos. The idea of prepping is going to help with other aspects of our repertoire. And what we call, some call planting, some call prepping, very similar techniques. So the other thing with the, and I went back and watched some of the last feedback you got from Sonia for your grade 5, and she talked about the slurs being something that we might need a little bit more work on. And I think, sometimes you start out with a nice sort of squared position. I think sometimes when you're playing, what happens is you tend to lean a little too far, we're to the left, and we're kind of, we're positioned a little bit too far this way, and we're kind of sometimes reaching to get higher frets. Whereas if we start with a more centered approach to our left hand, I think that would be more beneficial. Also, what happens if we do that, we don't lose our the natural curl to our fingers that we want. We want to kind of maintain that all the way down the fingerboard instead of actually kind of getting into a position where we're kind of distorting our left hand placement. So as we get to the lower strings, this sounds pretty good, but you see how some of the other fingers are kind of getting a little bit, it looks like there's a little tension in there. I would want to try to keep those other fingers as loose as possible. So you see how your pinky's kind of almost tucked in? I feel like I have to it takes me work to do that. And when I see sort of the pinky pulled away a little bit, I even see in your wrist too, that there looks like we're kind of maybe extending out a little bit too much. So it's hard sometimes to tell from, the camera angle and things like that. But I do think maybe just focusing on a more centered left-hand setup would be good. And there's other parts of the exam where that comes into play as well. So right there, I think we're a little bit too... You see how far the pinky is away from the fretboard? There, I am kind of set up like this. I think you're more like a... See, when I'm not centered, my pinky naturally tucks like that. Whereas when I open my hand, the pinky just kind of is curled and is just kind of loose. Okay? So just watch out for that turning of the hand sometimes. And it's also going to diminish the power of our slur as well, because we don't really get a good angle. I mean, I think they sound pretty good considering that, but I think they could sound even better. Again, there we're a little bit too much to the side. Centering that would help. Notice that you have tension now in your index finger and your pinky. Whereas they could be, ideally, we would want... Yeah, sometimes the pinky's going to kind of mirror what the ring finger's doing. But if I'm like this, now then both these fingers get tense. And I have that kind of thing. And I really can't execute the slur. The tone's not great when I'm turned either. Okay. And I think I would say the same thing when we do this combination too. It's almost like you kind of had to center your hand a little bit more just to get the pinky involved there. But then again, I think sometimes we're also coming off the neck too far. So that right there kind of shows me that as well. So just something to think about, centering that left hand a bit more. even there's moments in the repertoire where I think we could use some of that. Okay, so now this is the expression part. And let's take a listen to this. So like that, maybe thinking about, you stop. I heard a little bit of maybe a rallentando, but maybe an accelerando at times too, where with the when we get up to there, might be kind of helpful too. And then moments where like the scale, in measure, was it 1, 2, 3, measure 4. Something like that. So I think there are times where we can maybe even display more detail in terms of expression here. One of the things might be really focusing on where to stop those basses. Getting shaping that line, and then maybe adding this. So I think there might be a little bit more we can do there, but let's just have a listen one more time. Maybe a little break where little accelerando there, and then we're back again. Maybe not let the bass ring during that whole run. So thinking about that, stopping those basses too. Nice job at the end there, though. I did like that. That really sounded nice. Very, very nice ending. And if you get the ending, sometimes people forget about what came before it. So anyway, let me just go back to... sorry, I lost my spot here in our repertoire. Not repertoire, but our assessment. So with scales, I think one of the things too, I think we could have maybe the scales could be a little bit more legato. Left hand looks good here. I kind of hear like a slight, I know I'm being picky here maybe, but there's a slight break, I feel like, between the notes where we could maybe get more of... I'm sorry. Let me read it. So yeah, I try to really limit the space in between the notes. So that, I think, would be... And also if we have a... When we lift up, make sure we're not actually initiating a pull-off. And just there, moments like that, I feel like sometimes we might be stretching a little too much. The wrist might be a little too far extended, where we can actually get that. I think sometimes there's a thought that this part of the hand can't touch the neck here. We always have to be away from it like that, and it can, and it actually makes it I think easier to play something like this than if I'm not extending out. So I feel like sometimes there's a little too much, like right there I feel like there's a lot of extra movement and extension in the wrist than we would need. This was a little better with the legato, actually. I know we kind of go into uncharted territory up there, and it's not so easy. Yeah, but even getting up top there, when we really get into that stratosphere there, we could still try to, it's going to be different. Every guitar is kind of different too, a little bit. Like I have an extended fretboard, so it might look a little more comfortable when I do it. But just the idea of when we get up to the top there, perhaps, let me just find a good spot there. Like when I have the G and the E with 2 and 1. Let me just go back here for 1 second and just look at this. So when you get up top here, like let's say if I went from the 2 A's here, the C and the A, then we have the G, the D and the G, D and the B, E and C. I kind of look at the guide finger here, like 3 guides up. We guide 2 and 3 again, and I'm 2 now guides up, and I may be trying not to turn too much. Again, I'm trying to do that. And what can happen here is the thumb can actually extend out a bit here to facilitate that, right? So again, if I go from here, watch my left hand, I try to keep it as balanced as I can. Okay, so try to think, maybe look at that a little bit so we're not so much... let me back up to where we were really... Yeah, I'm sorry. I was doing that before like this, so that would be a bar. Where is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. This is a bar. Okay. Yeah, but even that one up there, just trying to maybe, again, kind of center our finger a little, our hand a little bit, and you can kind of use the thumb to kind of extend out a bit this way. So I can kind of try to maintain somewhat of my normal left hand position. But I understand, it gets hard up there. Again, going up, it seemed like it was a little more legato. On the way down, we're kind of maybe bouncing a bit more, meaning like that kind of thing. where we would want try to keep that legato as much as possible. So I would say the same thing with the scale in tenths as well. Again, I would watch that wrist. You know, that would concern me a little bit, just how far out we're extended with the wrist there. You know, something like that, I feel like that's a sign of a lot of tension for me. So just, you know, just something to monitor, okay? Now I'm going to move forward a little bit here because I know, you know, there's a lot to get to. Harmonics I thought were really, really good. Again, it's not easy getting all of them really cleanly, and you did a really, really good job with this. And the triplet, yeah, good. I also felt that sometimes with the scales, again, this might go back to some left-hand stuff too. Again, sometimes we kind of that's good. But again, sometimes, you know, making sure we are still maintaining our position in terms of like, let's say if I'm doing the, let's see, that first one was the D major, let me see, the G major scale. Making sure that everything kind of still, we keep that nice curl to the fingers and we're not kind of coming from it, you know, from the side, a side angle, a more centered position of the left hand. Like there, I would almost want to start out where I could easily reach the B. So see how when I start out here, my hand is very centered, and I'm almost, my pinky's kind of above the B already. When you kind of start this, you know, you kind of play the A, but the B, the pinky was kind of pretty far out of position. And I think this is the one with the nice, that's nice with the flesh tone there. Nice articulation there. Smooth shifting, good, good. Very nice. Yeah, good, good. So let's get into the repertoire a little bit here. And we're starting with the etude. Sorry about this. Getting my page. Yeah. So, with the etude, some of the things here that I think, that melody's coming out on the top. I think maybe at first here that accompaniment might be a little nicer, softer. You might want to maybe try that. And maybe less of a break there. And hearing some of these we have these harmonies that are we sort of have these moments of these suspensions and then the resolution. And that might be something where we'd want to lean into some of those, what can almost be like dissonances. And there's the resolution there. And then there's a nice moment there at 7. That might have made that a little softer. Yeah, maybe a little softer ending there too as we go back. Am I playing there? And then here's where I was thinking about, what I said before about some of the musical ideas. I probably wouldn't do this the same way twice on a repeat. So I might, the second time, just maybe change, there's a lot of things we could change here. We could change the dynamics, we could change the color. Maybe the second time I could even go for more. Maybe, let me see. Just some different ideas, maybe more of a build, more of a crescendo, because really the note that we're aiming for is in bar 7. We want that to be the loudest. And then this is sort of a release of that. It does seem like we're dynamically a little bit louder, but here I think that we could shape this a little bit more. And I think sometimes we might have, not so much of a break in between things. We probably shouldn't have too many moments of what I would call like a dead air, right? There's a big moment, a little bit of a surprise chord there, right? We kind of go, anytime I see chromatic notes, like any sharps or flats that are not in the key signature, those always seem like they're moments where the composer's going someplace or hinting at something, and I think they're kind of important moments, and they can be kind of surprise moments there, especially after all this, we have this F natural, we have that little kind of surprise there. That little going to that. And then so we always want to like accent the dissonance and then sort of release back on the resolution. Okay. Lean into the dissonances a bit more. This could back down. Yeah, I mean, you're not playing anything wrong here. I just think we could maybe come up with an idea. You could come up with a sort of an overall shape of this piece and, really just kind of map it out. Sometimes I'll use colors in my score where I want something to be a little bit more, kind of come out a little bit more. And, I think sometimes in performance with guitar, it's almost like, this style of guitar playing it's like the difference between if you're, let's say you're an actor and you're acting for television as opposed to you're acting for theater. And acting for theater, you need to be so much more gesture has to be sort of overdone and over animated. And we kind of have to do that with guitar. We kind of have to really over exaggerate. It's hard to quantify it and give it a number, but I would say maybe 25 to 30% more than we think we need to do is probably just about right. And a lot of times when I'm experimenting with this, I'll do extremes. I might come back and maybe go, if I'm... make that accompaniment as soft as I can and then maybe try to bring it up. Or maybe what if I made everything brighter? And there's that high point. Just really trying to exaggerate things. One of the things I noticed, throughout your repertoire here, if you just look at your right hand, we pretty much stay in one spot. And this was sort of a big takeaway of mine when I was watching your performance, because I feel like, on the guitar, it's difficult to do a lot of the musical things we're asked to do can be difficult. Playing legato, playing loud, right? Really expanding our dynamic range. But one thing that we can do really no problem, and is a strength of the guitar, is color change and the variety of color that we can get. And just starting a piece like, and then maybe on the repeat, so I really didn't see a lot of color change at all in your playing or hear it. So that's something that I think can be an easy fix that will just open up your musicality into this whole other world when you start experimenting with that. Okay. But let's move on. Again, like it's a lot of material here, I know. But let's maybe dive into Lagrima. So with this, that opening, really trying to make that... There's a few things I would like to see happen there. One would be that top line, a crescendo. And then maybe the middle voice, something sometimes what can happen, not that you're doing this, it's not too bad, but it's pretty good. The B sometimes, I'll hear people. I'll hear the B too loud, like. It's really not really giving us a lot. It's just kind of a drone there. Really this is the main thing, that bass line in this. So crescendo up to that, then back off here. And then we're into that next bit, right? Which you play really well. Nice. So again, another repeat where we could say something a different way. So maybe this time I would go maybe more ponticello, right? Go closer to the bridge and get maybe then I'll come back tasto. Oh, sorry. So something like that, really kind of experimenting with, again, some more musical elements here. That's nice. That was nice. Like I said, there's moments where really nice things are happening. And there I would maybe not make too much of a, there is a little rest, but, and here's really where we can really open things up here. And I think of this almost like a little echo. Sorry. So let's hear what we got here. Maybe not so much time to get. Oh, sorry. What am I doing there? So that ends the phrase there. So I wouldn't maybe take any time here. Rest. Again, we could do something different here if we come up with some ideas. And that's probably one of my favorite moments, that like yearning for you. It's like almost like I'm crying for you. You can almost make up a phrase there. I'm crying for you. I'm a firm believer if we're thinking about phrasing and how much time to take and things like this, I always feel like if we sing it, we can't go wrong, because when we sing it, there's a natural place where we want to breathe. There's a natural place where there's certain inflections. So if we kind of, if we sing the line, a lot of times when we play it, we're just going to make it that much more expressive. So that's one thing to kind of think about with some of this. But again, we could do a little more contrast there. You're playing it really, really nice, but a little bit more contrast, especially on repeats. Repeats always give us a chance to say it a little differently. So we have the evocación. So again with this, sometimes I think there's balance. Like that I don't have it in front of me, but that idea of a little bit more of maybe delicate on that opening. There's different ways you can finger that part, but yeah, just nice. Maybe I could go da-da-da-ya-da-da-da-da. Maybe we could do some rubato there. So right there would be perfect, like maybe go a little brighter. I think the color is really the big thing that I think would help a lot of this. Be just more expressive. Nice job with this. This isn't easy. Maybe there, like I might dig into that bass line a little bit more. Maybe this could be even more expressive the second time. Yeah, even that, like if you're going to do that backwards roll, that might be really effective back by the bridge. Like that might be nice. Good. So let's just touch on a few more, just a little things here. So one thing with the we have the Villalobos here. Okay, let's take a listen. Good. So now this piece is interesting because there's there's this subtitle to this piece that for this prelude number 4, there's the title attached to it is the sort of homage to Brazilian Indians, and sometimes, and I think this helps with interpretation of all your pieces. If you can kind of think of maybe a narrative, maybe a story. Sometimes it's implied in the music, and sometimes we can create our own. Like I mentioned before in the Lagrima, I was almost putting words to a phrase to help play it more expressively. But Lagrima, the story that I've heard is that Tárrega was traveling. He was away from his home, and it's a yearning for a recollection, recalling, being homesick essentially. Because even when it's in the major key, there's still a sadness, and the idea that it translates to tear, tears, lagrima. So I could put a story to that. there's memories, and sometimes when we're homesick and we're reminiscing, even the happy parts are still kind of sad, because you're not involved with them. So this one, I kind of like to think of it as, there's different sections in here, where the opening, and there's a great, if you haven't looked at it yet, the great masterclass with, I won't go into too much detail because she does it very, very well. Laura Snowden did a masterclass for us on this piece. And she talks about perhaps this is... this is the Indian chief talking to his tribe. And then the answer. So you can make that almost a little bit more in the background, where this is the main. And then he says it a different way the second time. And then that's maybe the rest of the tribe agreeing with what he's saying, and then it kind of goes from there. So I would think of this as a voice and then sort of an accompaniment. And sometimes you even get a really, really nice tone color. A lot of people play it here. But I like... Oh, let's see if I go... So... trying to play this E up here. And even like... I always feel like this is like almost, I think of this as like the cello part of the guitar. So you can experiment with different tonal things there. And again, this is one that I feel like tone color would be essential as well with really telling this story. Yeah, really in the background, right? We're going from forte to pianissimo, right? You get a really nice, beautiful sound on these lower notes. Backing off. Building this up, and then... And now this part here, I think what happens, and she uses the visualization here of a storm. Now this is where I think sometimes people start this too fast and there's almost like nowhere to go. And this could start like... And then you could build it up from there. But this is where... one of those techniques we were using before with the preparation can help. Because sometimes this gets too fast and people just go, whatever the notes are there. But we can kind of... we can kind of build up to that and then bring it back. So it can almost be like waves coming in and not something that's very, very choppy with the piece. Because I feel like we're... and you might be releasing because you're trying not to squeak on the bass string, but also... this says in here, cantabile, which I think we want. Yeah, I think the bass should have a little more connection to it. So that's one thing that you might want to think about. Really, really bringing this up. I know it says animato right from the start, but you could think about, like a storm. It you know, maybe it builds up, then it calms down again, then it builds up again. You know, you could do some different layers to this. So this is a lot to get into, you know, throughout this whole exam here right now. But, you know, just be open to interpretive ideas for this, and I would do a lot of listening. And one of the things I would suggest is her masterclass, because she plays it very, very. It's a very kind of fresh approach to playing this piece. But, you know, you do a really nice job here. But again, you know, I think given some more color options to this as well would be nice. And then with Kinkajou, this is one that I feel. Yeah, let me. That's as good as it's going to get right now, probably. I think with this one is a lot of the balance where we want to start maybe. You know, not starting too loud too soon, because then we really can't build. So this should be. This should be the highest point there. So this. Sorry. You know, and then, you know, bringing this way down. Nice job there. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, really nice stuff in this too. I would maybe just start softer. Yeah. But this is very nice, very well played. I just want to go to. I want to go to a part I really thought you did really well was this. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I know he says, and he's gives a lot of very, very direct instructions in the score too. And I know that one. I think it says like silk with that arpeggio. I just want to go back here to and then this one was just a whisper. Yeah, I would maybe bring that last one down to just really almost a whisper, like. Let's see. I think that's the chord. Yeah. Is that the chord? Hold on. Now I'm doubting myself here. Apologies. Yeah. Sorry. I was in. Yeah, so I would almost do. Remember how we were practicing in the practice routine before? We were doing the flesh tone with the thumb. This might be a perfect opportunity for it. So what I might do there is all thumb and actually put my finger I and M down on the top strings just to kind of stop my thumb, but do like a, because it really is a slower roll there. And just really make that a whisper. So, but really, you played that one really, really well. So, just in summary, sorry for this being so long, I think, the challenge would be sort of really, really developing the musical ideas and a musical roadmap for these pieces, really a musical script. And sometimes if creating a storyline helps you, more listening, I think, would be helpful. And these storylines and these narratives we can create can actually help us when we're in, not the most ideal situation. There is some tension and there is some pressure and we don't feel totally relaxed. These can be good distractions from those situations. So Kursad, thank you so much for making it this far with me. And also thank you for your patience for waiting for this response to come. But congratulations. And, I would say, work some more magic into these pieces, explore definitely the tone color. That would be a big welcomed addition. And best wishes for your continued musical success here at CGC. Thank you.